Kendell Kroeker at Opella, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ed, we'll start with you. Is there a specific reason or issue that convinced you to run?
Not really. I've been on the local politics for quite a few years now, the city council, the county commission, and to me it's sort of like a natural progression. I've always wanted to go down to Cheyenne and see if I could help out down there. I normally get along very well with people, get things done. Been a lot of committees, chaired a lot of committees, and I think I've got a pretty good knowledge of what the legislature does down there, and I think I can help them out.
Kendell, why re-election?
Because I feel like there's still work to do. I've enjoyed serving down in Cheyenne. I enjoy fighting against bigger government, fighting for individual liberty, fighting for our personal freedoms, and protecting our rights. And I think there's still work to be done. And so if the voters are like what I've done enough to send me back, then I'll happily go back for another term.
For you, Kendell, describe a vote you've made that you do differently if you got the chance.
I know I can think of one specific one. My first term that I definitely felt like I blew because it had to do with my industry. There was a bill that would have expanded the ORV trails to include the roads that were in state parks, so that you could ride on the roads in state parks with ORV trails, and it was sold as a way to connect all the trails together so you could ride from one trail to another. And so the bill passed overwhelmingly, and then some riding groups contacted me and said, hey, why did you vote for this? And I did some research, and there's not 1 inch of ORV trails in a state park. And what the bill allowed the state parks to do was take the money that the motorcycle and ATV riders are paying that's supposed to go for ORV trails, and actually now they can use it for road maintenance within the state parks where they're not connected to any trails. And that was one that I felt like I should have missed, I shouldn't have missed, and should have figured that out. And we haven't seen a huge impact from it yet because each project goes up and gets approved. But that was one that kind of stood out because I was in the industry, and I actually had some motorcycle riders upset with me on that vote, and I would definitely would have fought that bill.
Okay. Any response to that?
You want me to respond why he didn't vote
Yeah.
for that? How I would have done it? Well, in hindsight, it's pretty easy what the decision to make, but I'm just amazed that the writing groups didn't talk to him before and do a little lobbying to let them know what the truth is. And that, to me, is one valuable source of information, and that's the lobbying groups. And I would have probably agreed with his assessment of it. If it's not going to help everybody, it wasn't sold as it was to be used, and I would probably have voted against it.
Okay. For you, Ed, what time commitment do you think a seat on the legislature requires, and do you have enough time?
Yes, I have plenty of time. I have a part-time job with the county, and I've already talked to the county commissioners, and they have no problem with me doing the job down there. So I've got plenty of time to get things done.
Kendell, speak about the time commitment for legislature.
It's in some ways it takes both more or less time than you'd think. I mean, there's obviously everybody expects the session to be busy, and it is. You're busy from sun up to sundown, and oftentimes past that. But during the interim, I think you can be as busy or as not busy as you want to be. There's always something going on. There's always committee meetings from other committees, even if it's not your committee. It's something that I've had to work hard to balance as a business owner, is figuring out how many invitations do I accept and go to, and how much do I focus on my business. But I feel like I try and devote a little bit of time each day to making sure that I'm following up with constituents who email me and things, and I think I do a pretty good job of balancing work and legislative responsibilities.
Okay. All right. Let's get into some issues now. Ken, we'll start with you. Legislators hiked the gas tax to increase funding for roads, but the boost is only a small band-aid on a large, important problem. What would you propose for highway funding?
I think we've got plenty of money right now to fund highways without raising taxes. Our state spending in the past, 12 or 14 years is approximately tripled, and we've been growing a lot of government programs. Wyoming has more public employees per private sector employees of any state in the union, and it's not even close. I think we just need to scale back government and focus on what's important, and roads are important, and that's one of the primary duties that we should be doing, and I think we've got the money available if we prioritize correctly.
Well, since I was on the Highway Commission, I've got a pretty good idea where all the money goes. I can't say that there's a lot of waste in that department, but keep in mind, this is the #1 priority of mine for the state, because everything runs on the roads, whether it's tourism, business, whatever. And I would say that we have to do whatever we have to do. They just passed the highway bill. It's my understanding there's going to be a cutback in that. They're going to cut 28% of the funds going to the states. So that's going to make it even harder. At some point, you're going to have it fund to the general fund, or you're not going to keep your roads up. Right now, we're just maintaining our roads. That's all we're doing. And we're never getting any better. We never make them in A1 condition. All we're doing is maintaining. Roads are very important to the counties and the cities, and they're running out of money. Gas tax, although I hate taxes, it was a good tax, because right now, as I understand it, they just bid out, I think they've got 53 projects on the books now that they're going to use that money for, all to do with roads, and it's supposed to be used only for roads. So that's my priority if I get down there.
Start with you, Ed, for this one. What should Wyoming do to strengthen the market for its natural resources, and specifically coal?
Yeah, well, it's like any other business you're in. You have to find new markets. And in this case, if we can get the coal exported overseas, I know that's a big problem right now, but I think that's a great market. You have to go coal to liquids technology. That stuff is advancing. Anything we can do in the way of, we've got this great technology center down at the University of Wyoming, and I think we ought to use it more to come up with new ways to enhance our oil and gas production, and coal, and uranium, or whatever we can do to push the minerals in the state.
Ken?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing limiting our energy production is government regulations and unnecessary things. The free market's an amazing thing, and if we can get government out of the way and allow businesses to operate and develop our resources and develop our coal, then I mean that's going to happen. And I think that's what we need to do, is make sure that the government is removing any barriers to entry for any companies that want to do business in Wyoming and want to use their products. And so that's the biggest thing, is get government out of the way and let the private sector thrive.
What would you, as a legislator, do to improve education in Wyoming?
I think we should have choice and competition. I mean, as I said before, the free market works. It's been a great thing, and every time you have competition and choice, everybody gets better. I think that thinking that every school is going to be the same and do things the same way, and then we wonder why the results aren't better. If you have choices and competition, things get better. I think education should be local. It should be worked out between the local teachers and school boards and parents. Not from the federal government, or not national standards, because all kids are different and they shouldn't be treated the same. And I think my family is a great example of that, because I've got 2 kids. One, my oldest, is a very gifted child. He's a 3rd grader who was reading at a high school level, and was excelling in all his studies. And my youngest son has Down syndrome, and so he's way behind where an average child would be, and each one of them is at a radically different place and learns radically differently. And I think to try to have a cookie cutter approach that would apply to both my kids would do both of them a disservice. So if you keep things local and flexible and have more choices and more competition, then everybody's better served.
Well, I hate to say this, but I agree with him on a lot of these things, because I went the same thing with my children who were in the gifted program, and this Common Core is just driving me crazy. I think I've probably read 50 articles, 25 for, 25 against. I don't understand it. I don't know if the people of Wyoming don't understand it, but in my walking through the neighborhoods and talking to people, there's a lot of parents that do not like it, do not want it. They don't think it's going to be a hindrance to their kids' education. I believe in local control also, but they've got to do something to resolve this, because everybody's fighting over it right now, And that's one of the things I would go down there, I would like to get some information, make a decision. If the governor made the right decision to join Common Core, that's fine. Maybe he made a mistake, maybe he didn't. But I think it's an issue we have to resolve because we just keep bickering and fighting over it and nobody wants to do anything. And meanwhile, the kids are maybe getting better educated or less. Thank you.
Give you each a shot at this one again. Any other education issues that you want to address as a legislator? Because you both kind of touched on Common Core. Anything else education-wise?
I mean, I didn't specifically mention it, but I definitely think we need to get out of Common Core. I mean, I think it's a bad idea to set to allow, you know, forces outside Wyoming to determine our you know, what our standards and curriculum and things going to be. And people say it's not a curriculum, it's just standards. But when we're tied into tests, well, whatever you're testing over is what you're going to study, and the test is going to determine the curriculum. I mean, I don't know that there's I think we do a good job in Wyoming with our community colleges. I think that the work that community colleges do to educate our students is fantastic. I would like to see some changes in the Hathaway scholarship to allow students who aren't going to a traditional college to be able to use Hathaway funds, you know, for furthering their education for, I guess, what are more traditionally blue collar things in Wyoming, you know, welders, to turn a certificate in welding, you know, to be able to use Hathaway funds, you know, for that instead of producing or pursuing a traditional college degree, I think would really benefit our state because, you know, so many of the jobs are not necessarily something you need a traditional 4-year degree for, and I think that type of education is also very important.
I almost feel that this isn't an issue for the legislature. I think it's an issue for the local, the school board, the educators in the local area to decide. I don't know because I'm not an educator by trade, and I don't know a lot about it. I'm going to admit that to anybody. And I think once you get it down to Cheyenne and you start getting politics involved, my school district, your school district, you got to do this, you got to do that, I think it's all going to fall apart. So I believe in total local control, and I think the legislature ought to stay out of it unless they absolutely have to get involved in it.
Give you this one first. Game and fish funding is also an ongoing problem with the department stuff between rising costs and cap fees. What would you propose as a solution to the department's funding woes?
Well, to me, it's very simple. Get rid of all the stuff that they've taken away now, like the environmental stuff, get it back to being a game and fish, have the general fund take care of the extracurricular stuff. And if fishing game, hunting and fishing are a great boon to our tourist industry, I would say that I might even try to get some of the tourist funds that they're funded with. Because I'll tell you what, you can't keep going on. People like to come to Wyoming, they want to see the wolves, they want to see the bears. But they've got to fund it if you want it to continue.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Game and Fish, I don't think they have a funding problem. I think they have I guess a mission problem. I mean, they were started as an agency that's supposed to oversee the, you know, game animals and fishing animals and manage the wildlife that hunters and anglers are you know, hunting and harvesting in the state, I guess you'd say. And I think they need to get back to that because we've given them so many other duties that I just don't think are their core responsibility. That I think that if they focus on hunting and fishing and managing that type of wildlife, then the fees that they get from the licenses are more than sufficient to meet those needs. And I don't think that hunters and fishermen should be paying, you know, increased fees to take care of things that don't have to do with hunting and fishing as well. And I think that they could be a lot more efficient with things and not. I don't think it's their job to try and provide wildlife. As an example, I don't think it's necessarily appropriate for Game and Fish to run their own bird farms. I saw a study recently, and I forget the exact numbers, but it cost Game and Fish something like $20 for each game bird that they were releasing into the wild, and there are private birds that for less than $2 a bird can sell them to, you know, to game preserves. So, you know, let's get the government out of that and just buy it from private sources and save money. So I think there's a lot of areas where they could be more efficient as well.
Kendell, what's your philosophy and decision-making process when voting on a controversial issue or regarding an issue on which you have no strong stance?
Well, the first thing I always ask is, is it constitutional? And I try and look at what government's role is and see if it's constitutional or not. If it's not constitutional, I'm going to vote against it. Then I ask myself, is it something that government should be providing? Is it something we should be doing? The third thing I'm going to ask is, can we afford it? Is it a wise use of funds? I'm going to look at how it affects individual liberties and individual rights. And I feel if it conflicts with any of those, views or principles, then I'm going to vote no. And I generally, if I'm undecided, I always lean towards voting no, because I believe that if a bill is a good idea and it fails, it'll have the chance to come back again, and we can correct that and get it voted in. But if you vote in a bad law, we're stuck with it, and I think it's 10 times as hard to get rid of a bad law as it is to get one passed in the beginning. So my general philosophy is if I am undecided and can't make up my mind, I will typically vote no.
Ed, how'd you process?
Well, usually the first question I'll ask is, why are we doing this, and who's it going to affect? And if it's not going to affect a lot of people, it's for a small group or whatever the issue happens to be, I'm usually probably not too excited about doing anything. I have a pretty good feel of the community of Natrona County, what people like and what they don't like. And I also got to weigh that against what would this do to the effect it have on them. So, like I say, it's just like any other issue. You think about it, decide what's the pros and cons, and you make a decision. And go on to the next thing, because there's going to be a lot more. So.
And what should the state's role be in economic development?
Well, I'm a great believer in business. Now, you can argue the merits of helping a business, let the free market decide everything, but there are times when you need to give a business a boost to bring it to your state. It's a very competitive business. And if you're not willing to give tax breaks or possibly some money to bring a business to your state, you're going to lose out, because they have a lot of choices. They go to a lot of different places, and then they're basically bidding it out. Where do you want to go? If you want the business, in a lot of cases you have to buy the business. Maybe not my total philosophy, because I was in private business for myself, but if you want something that's good for the state, to bring people here, to bring jobs, you got to think about biting the bullet and try to help out when you can.
Ken?
Well, I definitely don't think the government should pick winners and losers, and that's oftentimes what happens when the government gets involved. Then it becomes not about, is the business a good business or not? It becomes about, is the person who owns the business politically well connected and well enough connected to get government money. I don't think it's appropriate to spend tax dollars to give it to one business over another. I think that the things we can do for business are make Wyoming a great environment for business, allow all businesses to thrive, get the government out of the way, get regulations out of the way, and allow businesses to come and operate. And I'm always hesitant when we say, well, we need to give this business a tax break. Well, if that tax break is good for business, let's do it for all businesses. I mean, let's not apply it specifically to one business at oftentimes, giving them a competitive advantage over other businesses. If it's good for business, then, let's apply it to everybody equally and create an environment where it's easy to do business, it's easy to operate. And, I'm hesitant and frustrated sometimes when I see, like that we gave Magpul Industries $13 million to move to Wyoming. Well, that was over $600,000 per employee that's coming here, and there's not even a guarantee that they're going to stay. And I'm just not sure that that's a good use of government funds. I think we could have found a way to allow them to come to Wyoming without, giving tax dollars away that benefited, the people of Wyoming more than that.
And we'll wrap it up with this last one. Ken, we'll start with you. Why should we choose you over your opponent?
Well, I would say take a look at my record. I think I've got a strong conservative record, and I think I've been very consistent in my views and keeping my promises that I've made down there. I've always promised to fight for smaller government, fight for individual rights, fight for individual liberty, protect our freedoms, push back against the federal government. I think that I've got a strong record of doing that. So I guess my response would be take a look at my voting record and look at how I voted and where I've stood on the issues. And if you like the job that I'm doing, then send me back.
Ed?
Well, not to say anything bad about my opponent, but we have a different philosophy. I intend to go down there and look at all the issues. I'm not going down there with a rigid philosophy of conservatism. I would look at each issue individually. I want to give you a good example of this is all these surveys were sent out to fill out before we get endorsed by any particular ones. Well, I've taken the stance that you cannot fill out those surveys. There's only one way before you'll get an endorsement, and that's really a very rigid way. So I decided not to do it. And if you get tied into all these conservative groups, very conservative groups, it's almost scary because you almost tie yourself into not being able to do anything on your own because you've made promises to them. I don't make promises. I make promises to the people in Trona County to do the best I can for them. I'm not going down there for my own personal philosophy. Yes, I have ideas about being a conservative. Maybe I'm not that right wing. Maybe I'm more of a moderate. I don't know. But the job is to go down there and get things done, and you have to do that. You have to be able to get along with the majority of people down there, whether it's Democrats, Republicans, Independents, whatever's down there. You have to be able to communicate with those people to get things done. Thank you.
Kendell, Ed, I appreciate the time today.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you much.